He had everything: a billion-dollar empire, a fleet of supercars, and a heart of solid ice. His name was Julian Vance, a man who built a skyscraper of wealth by tearing down the dreams of others. His days were a cold blur of ruthless calculations, and his nights were spent in a penthouse so high above the city, he couldn't hear the world he was so carelessly breaking. But in a single fiery moment, a tragic accident would strip him of his name, his fortune, and every memory he ever had. All that's left is a compassionate nurse who sees past the wreckage to the man he could be. This is the story of how a billionaire lost his entire world, only to find his soul. Julian Vance wasn't just a name, it was a weapon. His company, Vance Global, was a titan of industry, but its foundations were built on hostile takeovers and shattered careers. To Julian, business was war, and he played to win no matter who got hurt. His employees didn't respect him. They were terrified of him. He stalked the halls of his own glass and steel headquarters like a predator, his sharp eyes missing nothing, his lips always set in a thin, dismissive line. One Tuesday morning, the tension in the boardroom was so thick you could barely breathe. A long-serving executive, a man who'd given 20 years of his life to the company, was passionately pitching a new, more sustainable project. When he finished, silence hung in the air. Julian let it stretch out, enjoying the discomfort. Then he spoke, his voice quiet but sharp enough to cut glass. "That is sentimental nonsense. Your vision is weak, your numbers are a joke, and you have wasted 10 minutes of my time. You're fired. Security will see you out." The executive just stood there, stunned and pale. But Julian had already moved on, the man's entire career erased with a single brutal sentence. This was the world Julian built, a world of sterile luxury and crushing loneliness. His penthouse was like a museum filled with priceless art he never actually looked at. He ate every meal alone, served by a private chef he barely acknowledged. He had associates but no friends, admirers but no love. He drove a collection of hypercars, not because he loved driving, but to prove he was untouchable, always moving faster than everyone else. One evening, his assistant read him an email from a major children's hospital. They were hoping he'd attend their annual gala, maybe even make a donation for a new pediatric wing. He waved a dismissive hand before she could even finish. "Decline, and block their email. Charity is a celebration of failure." His assistant just nodded, used to his casual cruelty. To Julian, compassion was a weakness. He thought he had built a fortress against all weakness, but he had only built a beautiful prison for himself. The night it all came crashing down started with a roar of anger and the blur of blinding speed. A rival had just snatched a deal Julian had been chasing for months. It was a minor loss for his empire, but for Julian, any loss felt like a personal attack. Fueled by a blinding rage, he jumped into his most prized possession, a limited edition hypercar, and tore down the winding coastal highway. The rain had started an hour earlier, turning the road slick and dangerous, but Julian didn't care. He pushed the car harder and faster, the engine screaming into the night. He took a sharp turn way too fast, and for a split second, the tires lost their grip. For a normal driver, it would have been a terrifying scare. For Julian, going that fast, it was a catastrophe. The car spun out of control. It was a nightmare of screeching tires and shattering glass. The car slammed into the rock face along the highway, the front end crumpling like paper. It flipped, rolling over and over before landing on its roof, a mangled wreck of metal and steel. For Julian Vance, the world didn't fade to black, it just stopped. The only sounds were the hiss of rain on hot metal and the ticking of a hazard light that had somehow survived. The first responders who arrived on the scene didn't see a billionaire. They saw a man who was somehow miraculously still breathing. They worked frantically to cut him out of the twisted metal cage. He was unconscious, his expensive suit torn and stained. He had no ID, no phone. His wallet had been thrown from the car in the crash, lost somewhere in the darkness. He was just a John Doe, rushed to the nearest public hospital, St. Jude's General. As the doctors and nurses fought to save his life, the name Julian Vance was never spoken. The Ice King was gone. In his place was a broken, anonymous man. The first thing he registered was the dull, fluorescent light. Then the sounds, the steady beep of a machine, muffled voices, and the squeak of sneakers on a linoleum floor. He tried to open his eyes, but they felt like they were glued shut. When he finally did, the world was a blurry, sterile white. A woman in blue scrubs was checking the IV in his arm, her face a mix of concern and focus. "Welcome back," she said softly. "You gave us quite a scare. Do you know where you are?" He tried to answer, but his mind was a complete and total blank. He searched for a name, a place, a single memory, and found nothing. It was like staring into a thick fog. Panic washed over him. He didn't know his own name. The woman seemed to sense his terror. "It's okay," she said calmly. "You were in a very bad accident. You have a head injury, and it's normal to be confused." She told him her name was Clara, and that he'd been unconscious for 3 days. Her patient, gentle manner was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. The days that followed were humbling. The man who once commanded boardrooms now struggled just to feed himself. The powerful voice that had sealed billion-dollar deals was gone, replaced by hesitant, confused whispers. The diagnosis was severe amnesia. His entire personal history had been wiped clean. Most of the overworked hospital staff treated him with detached professionalism. He was just another patient, another chart to update. But Clara was different. She saw the pure fear in his eyes. She took the time to talk to him, not as a patient, but as a person. She'd tell him about her day, about her cat, about the book she was reading. These little pieces of normalcy were his lifeline. One afternoon she brought him a cup of tea. His hands were still trembling from the trauma, and he spilled some on his gown. He felt a hot flush of shame. I can't do anything," he stammered. Another nurse might have sighed and cleaned it up impatiently, but Clara just grabbed a cloth and gently dabbed the spill. "Hey," she said, looking him right in the eye, "you survived a crash that should have killed you. You're relearning how to do everything. Spilling a little tea is forgivable. Let's try again." In that moment, something shifted. It was the first time, maybe in his entire forgotten life, that someone had shown him pure, simple kindness. It wasn't a transaction. She didn't want anything from him. It was just care. Clara didn't see a John Doe. She saw a human being who was hurting. For a man with no past, these moments with his nurse were becoming the first blocks in a new foundation, one built not on power, but on a simple human connection. As weeks turned into a month, the man they called John began to heal physically, but his memory was still a locked door. With no ID and no family looking for him, he was stuck. He was moved to a longer-term care floor, and it was there, under Clara's quiet encouragement, that his real transformation began. Life on the ward was humbling. John, a man once used to giving orders, now found purpose in the smallest tasks. He started by making his own bed, which felt like a huge victory. Then, seeing how busy the nurses were, he started helping out. He'd fold laundry, his movements slow but careful. He'd sit with an elderly patient with dementia, just so she wouldn't feel so alone. He helped deliver meal trays, offering a shy smile to each patient. Clara saw that this newfound purpose was the best kind of therapy. She'd save little jobs for him, making him feel needed. "John, could you be a lifesaver and restock the linen closet? My back is killing me," she'd say, even though she could do it herself. And John would agree with an eagerness that was completely alien to the man he used to be. He found a quiet satisfaction in these simple acts of service, a feeling his billions had never given him. During her breaks, Clara would often sit with him in the hospital's small courtyard. She'd talk about her tiny apartment, her rescue cat, her dream of seeing the cherry blossoms in Japan. John would just listen, captivated. Her world was so different from the cold emptiness he sometimes felt at the edge of his missing memories. One day he asked her, "Why are you so nice to me? Everyone else is busy. They do their job, but you actually talk to me." Clara looked up from a wilting rose bush. Because being a nurse isn't just about medicine. It's about seeing the person in the bed. You were scared and you were alone. Everyone deserves someone in their corner. Her words hit him hard. Julian Vance had never had anyone in his corner because he never let anyone get close. He saw people as pawns. This idea of unconditional support was completely new, and he started to change. The guarded, fearful look in his eyes was replaced by a gentle curiosity. A real smile, something Julian Vance hardly ever used, started to appear more and more. He learned the names of the other patients, that Mrs. Gable loved romance novels, and that Mr. Chen missed his grandkids more than anything. He was beginning to feel empathy. He felt a pang of real sadness when a patient got bad news, and a surge of joy when someone got to go home. He was connecting with people in a way he never had before. The billionaire was gone. In his place was a man who was, for the first time, truly rich. The fragile peace of John's new life was shattered on a sunny afternoon. A sleek black town car pulled up to St. Jude's General. A man in a tailored suit, his face creased with worry, stepped out. It was Arthur Finch, Julian Vance's long-suffering assistant, who had finally tracked him down after weeks of frantic searching. Arthur walked onto the ward and just froze. There, in the middle of the hallway, was Julian Vance, the most powerful man he knew. But he wasn't barking orders. He was on one knee, patiently tying the shoelace of an elderly patient. He was smiling, a gentle, genuine smile. "Mr. Vance?" Arthur whispered. John looked up, confused. The name meant nothing. But the man's face, it stirred something unpleasant. He saw a flash of a sterile office, of this same man standing before him, head down, taking a storm of insults. The image vanished as quickly as it came, leaving him dizzy. "Who are you?" John asked, his voice trembling. "Thank God," Arthur cried, rushing forward. "We've been looking everywhere for you. Mr. Vance, it's me, Arthur. You were in an accident." Suddenly, the anonymous John Doe was headline news. High-priced doctors swept in, and Julian was whisked away from St. Jude's and back into a world of impossible wealth. He found himself in a luxurious private suite that looked more like a five-star hotel. And then the memories came back, not as a gentle stream but as a violent flood. Flashes of angry boardrooms, lonely nights in his penthouse, the cold, hard face he used to see in the mirror. He remembered his name. He remembered his company. He remembered the power and the soul-crushing isolation, and he was horrified. The man he used to be was a monster. He couldn't connect that cold, cruel person to the man he was now. He looked at his hands, the same hands that had learned to fold linens and offer comfort, and remembered them signing papers that ruined people's lives. He saw his reflection and felt sick. This powerful Julian Vance felt like a mask he was being forced to wear. The memories of being John, of the quiet moments with Clara, of the simple satisfaction of helping someone, that felt more real, more him than his entire past life. He had his memory back, but he'd never felt more lost. Back on his throne, Julian Vance was surrounded by his old life, the fawning executives, the endless reports, the crushing weight of his empire. But it all felt hollow. The view from his office, once a symbol of his power, now just made him feel alone. The roar of his supercars sounded obnoxious. The corporate games he used to love now seemed like a meaningless, destructive waste of time. His old instincts flared when a rival company made a move. The old Julian would have crushed them without a second thought. His team presented a ruthless plan of attack. He listened quietly. When they finished, he simply said, "No. There's a better way. One where we don't have to destroy them to succeed." The room fell into a shocked silence. The man they knew was gone. The heart that Clara had found buried under decades of ambition was now in charge. He remembered her talking about how understaffed the hospital was, how nurses had to buy their own supplies. He remembered the worn-out equipment and the exhaustion in their eyes. His first major act wasn't a corporate takeover. He established the Clara Foundation, an endowment so massive it would solve St. Jude's funding problems for the next century, with a focus on supporting nurses across the city. He completely overhauled his own company, demanding ethical practices, profit-sharing, and a real charity division. He was rebuilding his empire, but this time on a foundation of kindness. A week later, he went back to St. Jude's. He wasn't wearing a suit, just a plain shirt and trousers. He walked past the new wing already under construction and found his way back to the courtyard. Clara was there, tending to the same rose bush. She looked up and gave him a soft, knowing smile. She'd heard the news, of course. "John," she said, still using the name of the man she knew. "Or should I call you Julian?" "The man you knew was John," he said, his voice full of emotion. "And he's the man I want to be, Julian Vance. He was completely lost. You didn't see a billionaire or a patient. You just saw a person who was hurting, and you showed him kindness. You taught me what it means to have a heart, Clara. I didn't just lose my memory, I lost my way, and you helped me find it again." He took her hand. "My memory is back, but my life didn't really start until I met you. Let me build a new one. With you." Clara looked into his eyes and saw not the powerful billionaire the world was talking about, but the kind gentleman she had helped put back together. She saw John, and in that quiet hospital courtyard, she said yes. The billionaire had lost his world, but in doing so, he found the one thing that was missing all along, a heart worth having, and the person who recognized it from the very start. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more. Let us know in the comments what you thought of Julian's transformation. Thanks for watching.